When you look at the global business environment, there are two change factors. Number one change factor is technology. When Microsoft was started in 1975, there were only a few hundred software developers across the globe. Today, we have 10 million software developers that develop software today that dictate on how we are going to work together in the future. Secondly, business is always about ideas and money. Entrepreneurs pitch their ideas, investors give them money. So the business creation cycle has tremendously accelerated. There is a London research report on entrepreneurs that stated that in 2006 there were 50 million new businesses created. So when you think about the changes that businesses need to make, is they need to get on the bandwagon to embrace technology and utilize technology to improve productivity. But at the same time, they need to be conscious that even as you listen to this, there are entrepreneurs somewhere in the world that think about serving your customer better, and they want to put you out of business. We live in an age where there are an infinite number of choices for buyers, which makes the profession of selling a lot more challenging. So this is also a change driver. As customer expectations rise, salespeople need to realize that and catch up with the buyer. And when it comes to the information age, in the past, salespeople were the providers of information for the customer. And their role was more to deliver knowledge to the customer. But now with the information age, the customer has all the knowledge, so the role of the salesperson has changed, and the salesperson is now forced into the role of the trusted advisor for the customer, which means that the selling skills have changed, and the salesperson needs to start by understanding where the customer is in terms of speed of information, and needs to establish trust, because without trust, there's no reason to continue the relationship. Now, another way to look at it is companies talk about customer engagement. And engagement, the word comes from the French, engagé, which means a promise to marry. So customer and salesperson, they are bound by common interests. The customer has the need, the salesperson has the potential solution. So the sales process is really a process where buyer and seller walk on the road of agreement together. So when the salesperson is behind too far from the customer, when the salesperson travels too far behind the customer, there's no sales. If the salesperson is ahead of the customer, there's no sale. They need to walk concurrently, and that's the challenge of selling today, to be in sync with the customer. We live in an age where everything is connected to everything. So we live in an interconnected world where we are driven to what we call co-creation. I'll give you one example. Frito-Lay has created a Super Bowl commercial at the last Super Bowl that was not created by Frito-Lay, it was not created by their ad agency, but by their consumers. So that's a co-creation marketing process. Selling is about co-creation. And the internet makes a lot more connections for us than ever before. But at the same time, the internet creates more disconnects than ever before. So the disconnects are from the fact that our time gets fragmented through emails, through text messages, through voicemail, through the speed of information really fragments our time, and it shortens the attention span of the salesperson, and it makes it more challenging for salespeople to truly connect with the customer. When you get 100 buyers in the room, you probably get 100 complaints about their salespeople. At the same token, if you take 100 salespeople in a room and ask them about their buyers, they will all complain that their customers are the worst. And the frustration comes from the buyer having a need that is not always truly defined. Buyers are always in flux, and a need is not like a statue. A need is like a river. And good salespeople recognize that, and they sync up and they help the customer define and articulate what their true need is. And the best salespeople are not salespeople. They are specialists in helping the customer win. And that's why many companies now use the title Customer Success Specialist. Well, let's start about analyzing where the success of a business comes from. Peter Drucker once said, the purpose of business is to create a customer. And without a customer, you don't have anything. So the role of customer creation is really the salesperson's role. But in order to fulfill that role, the salesperson needs to depend on a structure. And the structure of an organization starts with the company's mission. And the mission is the noble purpose that identifies why do we go to work? What is our noble purpose? Number two, a vision is aspirational, that defines where we want to be in the future. A mission is inspirational, which spells out what we want to do today. And then you have a value system. You need to spell out to employees, how do we work together? For example, the Ritz-Carlton has a credo that says, we are ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. So that's a core value. Johnson & Johnson does not have a mission statement or a vision statement. They have a credo that's one page, and that one page spells out exactly how employees should work together, how the company interacts with customers, what responsibility they're taking, and how do they establish trust with their customers. I think that there are several goals that salespeople can set for themselves to achieve the top 20% in any organization. And the first rule is to be trustworthy, to never overpromise and underdeliver. But secondly, customers want authenticity. They don't want something fake, they want the real deal. And they want, thirdly, somebody who's committed to helping win, because everybody wants to win. So if the salesperson recognizes those requirements and integrates those requirements in their sales approach, they have a greater chance of being successful. In the 50s, salespeople were trained to verbalize a pitch, and they went through a ritual. So salespeople were thought of as like actors who can deliver the lines, and if they deliver the lines well, they're going to be successful. And also in the...
We talked about it earlier. I think this is it. I mean, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
then closest will be there.
nice, quite nice.
Glad I go. Thanks for having me.
Hi, my name is Talking Head number 2041.
It is rolling, and you can ask that question again, Richard.
Yeah.
My bad. That's right. Or I'll blend it on the camera, whatever. Speak.
What is sales?
Well, many people have a problem defining sales. If you walk into a room, ask 100 salespeople and sales leaders, what is selling? How do you define selling? You get 100 different answers. And selling is really something that is in between an art and a science. When you look at the art side, selling is about performance. And the analogy I can give you, a good salesperson is not like a symphony orchestra that delivers something that's very predictable. In terms of performance, selling is more like jazz, where you listen to a riff from the customer and you respond with a riff of your own. And on the science side, you have the science of business. You have the science of the economy. You have the science of psychology. And when people ask, are salespeople made or born? It's really both. You need to master the art. You need to master the science.
I think that's great. Now, you had mentioned before, you used a couple of examples of companies, people who run companies, in terms of whether they were more science or more art. Is that something that you would mind talking about.
What did we talk about?
You talked about Apple being a little bit more
Oh,
art and
yeah.
Dell being a little bit more
Right.
science.
And which one was science?
Science was Dell.
Dell, right, right,
Yeah, with
right,
Apple being more art.
right, right.
Could you, okay, so.
Okay.
Part science, part art. Could you characterize some businesses and some business leaders along those lines?
Oh, absolutely. When it comes to art, what comes to mind is Steve Jobs. Steve is really an artist. He uses aesthetics to sell that's combined with science. So the art is in the foreground. When you look at Michael Dell and Dell Computer Company, it's much more science than art.
If you don't mind, I can go through that again just because
Okay.
it's somewhat.
Okay, still rolling?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, characterize again, please, science and art in terms of business leaders of companies.
Well, when you look at Steve Jobs, what comes to mind is art. You look at the video iPod, that's a form of art. It's a cultural icon almost. When you look at Michael Dell, you think of science, and there's not much art involved. When you look at the success of the Apple stores, they create a direct connection with the customer, where they have geniuses that help consumers understand the use of the computer. Dell has to catch up with that.
Using broad strokes, again, general audience, I want to learn a little bit more about your perspective on the competitive global environment that we're in today. And I liked the fact that you gave me about the 50
Right.
million new, was it 50 million new businesses?
Right, right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
there's another idea that I want to share with you.
Sure.
Okay, ready? When you look at the global business environment, there are two change factors. Number one change factor is technology. When Microsoft was started in 1975, there were only a few hundred software developers across the globe. Today, we have 10 million software developers that develop software today that dictate on how we are going to work together in the future. Secondly, business is always about ideas and money. Entrepreneurs pitch their ideas, investors give them money. So the business creation cycle has tremendously accelerated. There is a London research report on entrepreneurs that stated that in 2006, there were 50 million new businesses created. So when you think about the changes that businesses need to make, is they need to get on the bandwagon to embrace technology and utilize technology to improve productivity. But at the same time, they need to be conscious that even as you listen to this, there are entrepreneurs somewhere in the world that think about serving your customer better, and they want to put you out of business.
Let's talk about sales, or let's talk about buyers and sellers. Based on the deep reservoir of knowledge that you can tap into, is there a consensus now as to what a buyer demands from a seller? I mean, what are their expectations when they're buying a product or service?
It's a great question. We live in an age where there are an infinite number of choices for buyers, which makes the profession of selling a lot more challenging. So this is also a change driver. As customer expectations rise, salespeople need to realize that and catch up with the buyer. And when it comes to the information age, in the past, salespeople were the providers of information for the customer. And their role was more to deliver knowledge to the customer. But now with the information age, the customer has all the knowledge, so the role of the salesperson has changed, and the salesperson is now forced into the role of the trusted advisor for the customer, which means that the selling skills have changed, and the salesperson needs to start by understanding where the customer is in terms of speed of information and needs to establish trust, because without trust, there's no reason to continue the relationship. Now, another way to look at it is companies talk about customer engagement. And engagement, the word comes from the French, engagé, which means a promise to marry. So customer and salesperson, they are bound by common interests. The customer has the need, the salesperson has the potential solution. So the sales process is really a process where buyer and seller walk on the road of agreement together. So when the salesperson is behind too far from the customer, when the salesperson, 2 or 3 million new salespeople, you look at the 4,000 colleges across the country, only a small percentage, only 35 of them teach selling as a degree. But those 1,500 salespeople that graduate, they all know how to make a cold call, how to write a sales letter, how to close a sale, how to use sales technology. They all know how to relate to the customer and be in sync with the customer. So those salespeople that are trained by colleges, they're much more effective. They keep their job, they get hired earlier, and a lot of them can advance faster in their careers. So it makes only sense to create a partnership between business and colleges, because colleges have a hard time to prove to their college that selling is an important subject. But business wants graduates that get up to speed very quickly. So there has to be a better relationship between business and colleges to co-create more professional salespeople.
Is that, I mean, do you see that happening?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Leading companies are already getting involved in, like 3M, you know, their sponsor colleges. And a lot of the professors that teach selling, they reach out to business and have their students reach out to business. And they get endowments from business. For example, the Russ Berry Institute got a very significant endowment from Russ Berry to continue sales education at a higher level.
And you touched on it, but just as a separate question, how much time and expense will go into training?
Right.
A new high
Well, let's look at the financial side. When a family invests in education, they spend probably about $30,000 a year for college education. So that's $120,000. So what do you do with a degree in Greek philosophy and art semiotics if you need to make money? You need to go out and make a living. So if you had a second degree and have sales, you can always fall back on that and get a job and get a return for your education investment. Now, when you look at the investment side from the company point of view, companies spend typically in the first year between $35,000 and $55,000 to train, educate one salesperson. And then there's no guarantee after their training that the salesperson will stay with the company, because there is significant turnover in the first year. And sometimes, for example, in insurance companies, the turnover in the first year is about 100%. That's why it is much more from a macroeconomic point of view to get colleges to prepare salespeople for selling. And there's another global idea is when you look at America's economy, which is in the trillions of dollars, how is that money being produced? Now, let me take another take on this. When we look at the American economy globally and ask the question, who is responsible for the GDP? Is it manufacturing? Is it service? Who is responsible for achieving those sales? It's really the salesperson who is the engine of the American economy. And without salespeople, the train would stop.
Are you saying then that having a strong professionalized sales force is almost a matter of national self-interest?
I really think that it is of national interest and of global interest to have more professional salespeople out there, because if salespeople were more professional, then they could help more customers win, which would create more jobs, which would create more ideas for new companies, and which contributes to, that's the tide that raises all boats.
Every year when you see national polls that talk about credibility in relation to professions, salespeople almost always end up dead last, the sales profession. Why do you think that is?
When you look at polls like what is the credibility of a pharmacist versus a salesperson, the pharmacist always wins, and only the lawyer is below the salesperson. And that is what I call noise on the sideline. It's really not relevant. What is relevant is how can we create a sales organization that is focused on helping the customer win. Because the more we help organizations to be excellent, to be customer-centric, to be customer-focused, the more that noise on the sideline will translate into applause on the sidelines.